Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast. Thank you for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Today we have a fantastic discussion. A couple nights ago, mornings for me, night for him, I was able to sit down with Sailor James. So you may know his very popular YouTube channel. I caught up with him in Indonesia. He is on this multi-year round the world journey, and it was absolutely fascinating to sit down and talk with him. You definitely want to check out his YouTube channel, Sailor James. He's got some really great long form passage sort of films, and then he's got the episodic stuff, but he's also recorded a few of his presentations, which I found very interesting, very different style than what I do normally for my sort of presentations and talks, but really, really good. And the way he feels about and expresses his love of being on the ocean is absolutely amazing. So it's great to sit down, two solo sailors, just kind of hashing it out and everything. And hopefully there will be more of these to come. If you want to help support this channel and this podcast, please consider checking out the links in the description. We've got everything from the Patreon family to one-time donations. We also have started a GoFundMe for basically getting back on the horse. I want to go after the Atlantic figure eight once more, and I am obviously going to pay the lion's share, but I need all the help I can get to make sure Sparrow is good to go. And we've had our first donation the other night, which was super exciting. Other than that, if you are looking for someone for a speaking event or anything like that, I am your man, sailingintoOblivion.com for that, coaching, consulting, all that sort of stuff. Without further ado, my conversation with Sailor James. Thanks for watching. Sailor James, dude, all the way from Indonesia. I'm over here in northern Michigan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Oh, I kind of feel like, so it's 6 a.m. over here, and I kind of felt like I woke up, and I felt like I had to go on watch at, the dog watch in the morning. But then I was like, oh yeah, but I'm interviewing Sailor James. And so I was like, It's like when you come up and it's a beautiful, crispy morning on the ocean. It's like, oh,
it's so fun. It's so funny after so much solo ocean sailing, which you will know this 1,000%. I don't feel entitled to a full night's sleep ever anymore. It's like, I'm chill. Like if I wake up in the middle of the night, it's not, I get to go back to sleep. It is funny how it changes your sort of relationship with sleep.
It definitely does. I don't know about you, but I kind of always get worried. Every once in a while, you're listening to some of these podcasts or information about how important sleep is to everyday life. And they'll be like, oh man, if you're not getting, the 7 hours or whatever that you need, it's really detrimental. And I'm like, dude, they should do a case study on me, man.
Yeah.
We just kind of bowl through it. And it was actually, that was kind of one of the things that was interesting. I mean, as far as the sleep stuff goes, because I get that question all the time. How in the heck do you do it, and what's your schedule? And actually, so I had Colin Denker on a couple days ago.
Nice.
And he was asking how I wake up out there and all this sort of stuff. And I don't use any sort of alarms. I kind of just let, my boat and the weather and all the conditions dictate how much I can sort of sleep. But I had never broken it down like you did in that presentation where you were talking about the two different aspects, where it's like ocean open sailing or actual coastal sailing.
Yeah.
You just go through kind of what your sort of system is so that you don't end up essentially running into anything or getting run over.
Yeah, it's very wildly different things. So open ocean with AIS working in let's say just the general Pacific Ocean. My sort of watch schedule works I sleep in 2-hour increments, and I say my night shift starts at 9 p.m. and it usually ends around 4 a.m. or something like that. But I get up at 4 a.m. pretty much every day anyway. But so at sea, I'll lay down at 9 and I have alarms set for every 2 hours. But as you know, the ship will wake you up if she needs something, but if the alarm goes off, I get up, I have a slow scan of the horizon, I check the AIS, check the course, and then lay back down for another 2 hours. between Los Angeles and New Zealand, which was like, I think eight, I don't know, 9,000 miles, close to 10,000 miles. I saw 6 ships total at sea.
Yeah.
Between New Zealand and Australia, which was 1,200 miles, I saw 12 ships at sea. And between Thursday Island, Australia, and the Kai Islands of Indonesia, I saw 36 ships at sea.
Jeez.
And I saw countless that weren't, many of those weren't on AIS. And I saw probably 1,000 targets on AIS that I didn't ever see. So
Right,
it all
right.
depends on the waters you were in. But, and then coastally, if I have to do coastal night passages, which are doable kind of anywhere but Southeast Asia, you can't really, it's very tricky to do them. I sleep in the cockpit in like 15-minute increments. And similar
Yeah.
to what you were saying, like with that schedule, it's like I always wake up before the alarm. Like I just get in this rhythm to where like
Yeah.
I'll just like kind of power down, get up, check, power down. And then if I see a ship or a boat or anything, then I stay up and keep eyes on it until the safety is clear. And with AIS and everything, it's so much easier nowadays than, back
Oh,
when my heroes were doing it.
yeah. I mean, can you imagine like Robin Knox Johnson? He's sailing back, cutting through these shipping channels, and he has basically some little dim light, if that. And
Yeah.
oh my God, I can't even imagine. I mean, the AIS, I've had mine malfunction a couple of times, and like where I wake up and I can see targets on there, but the alarm didn't decide to go off, and it
Mm-hmm.
sort of sends shivers down my spine where I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
so I can't really 100% count on this. I mean, I would say it works, and I've had a couple different versions of it, but it works, I'd say like 95% of the time, and
Mm-hmm.
I usually feel confident. But in my 2022 trip where I got turned upside down, I lost all my aerials and stuff for like the I don't know 18 days or whatever it took to get back. I had no AIS at all, and
Mm-hmm.
that was nerve wracking. I was also pretty rattled from the experience, but yeah, that I don't know. AIS is definitely up there as far as for me personally, one of the most important, tools that I have that make me feel confident and comfortable when I'm out there.
100%. And when on my sail to Hawaii, my AS failed like 3 days out. So that entire passage, I slept in 1 hour increments. So I never slept more than an hour for 32 days. And so
Wow.
that was pretty gnarly. And
Dude,
so
it's so brutal.
what was your, how long, what are your sleep increments when you did your 271 days?
So for that one, I kind of had a similar thing where, I usually try and get some sort of nap in during the day if I can, like an
Mm-hmm.
hour or two. And I'm always feeling pretty good as far as like my visibility. It seems to be if I can sleep, if I'm tired during the day, I always sleep a little better. Just kind of, I think that ships would see me.
Mm-hmm.
But then typically around like 11 or midnight is when I start to like bed down, if you will, where
Mm-hmm.
I'll hop in the bunk, usually get an hour or two, again, depending
Mm-hmm.
on where I am in the world. And then essentially, like you said, you get up, I look at the sky, I'm looking for squalls, any changes. If nothing has changed, boom, I'm right back down the bunk. And I'll do that all the way until just about sunrise. And that typically will equate to almost like 8 hours or so of sleep in every
Mm-hmm.
24. And then there's
Yeah.
those times where you're becalmed or anything like that, and that's when I really try to bank up my sleep hours when there's just nothing to be done or the conditions are absolutely perfect. When I was going, as I was just north of the doldrums in the Atlantic and hooked into the trade winds, and I did a flyby through the Caribbean. It was like 12 days of perfect sailing conditions. I only did 2 sail changes, and that was just dousing the drifter and then putting it back up for a squall.
Mm-hmm.
And I could have slept easily probably 18 hours a day if I wanted to at
Yeah,
that
that's the
point.
best, man. That is the best.
Spent so much
I know.
time just in my bunk reading. Like it was
Yeah.
classic. Loved it.
I mean, isn't that most solo sailing though? It's like, you just get in your nest and you get a book and
Yeah.
like that's the
Oh
kind of
yeah.
the spot. Wedge yourself in there.
Dude, it just feels so good. Like that is honestly, it's one of my favorite things. Even just to think about when I'm on land, sort of planning, the next time I get to go back out to sea, I'm like, oh, what kind of books am I gonna get? And I got this
Mm-hmm.
little bronze, reading lamp above my head. I don't know. It's this romantic idea of it. And frankly, it doesn't work out very often that it's just like perfect and you get a ton of that. But man,
Yeah.
I dream about that bunk and reading those books well into the night. Gosh, just so much
You
fun.
know, I know you've like interviewed Rutherford before. I hung out
Oh
with
yeah.
him and Randall Reeves in Annapolis in 2023. We were talking about all this stuff, and me and Rutherford were talking about like it's easier. Like he was saying, he can better judge the speed of the vessel and everything from the berth than he can from standing in the cockpit, like without any instrumentation. Because knowing the sounds of like what the boat's doing and everything, like you just
Yeah.
get in sync with your vessel so much that you know all the sounds and what the water sounds like on the outside of the hull and the wind and the rigging. And yeah, it's interesting how you just become one with your vessel.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it, man. He and I spent Rutherford and I got to spend like 40 days or something together when I joined one of his expeditions last summer, and oh my god, he and I have like very opposite temperaments and sailing styles and all this, but they complemented each other, and I think it was great because he's obviously the captain and I was the first mate, and I wanted to play the role as best as possible. So there was like I definitely left any ego on the dock when we left, so I was in there scrubbing heads and doing all that, but also giving him a bunch of shit when I could and all that,
Yeah.
and it was an absolute blast. They just made it up to St. John's, I think.
Oh, cool. Nice, nice.
Yeah, yeah. So they're making their way up there. I was hoping to be able to join. Possibly might be able to get up there if I can open up my schedule, because I have always wanted to see those high latitudes with all the
Hmm.
glaciers and the fjords and stuff. It sounds like it's a pretty good time.
Yeah, Greenland was like one of the most amazing places I've ever been on a sailboat. Like, I'll definitely go back with Tritea and do a full season there once I finish the circumnavigation because Greenland was just mind blowing. It's just another world, stunningly beautiful.
Well, neat. So
Like,
didn't
high,
you
yeah,
did Greenland, and then did you make it all the way to Iceland?
yeah, we sailed all the way to Iceland. Yeah, so we sailed from Newfoundland to Greenland. We cruised Greenland for a week, and then like there's like giant icebergs pinching us into the anchorage. Like we had to haul up
Shit.
and move right at dark. It's like I was like the iceberg captain, so like the crew that was sitting anchor watch would wake me up, and I would get in the dinghy and push growlers away from the boat because they were like stuck in this sort of eddy in the yeah. So it was just like next level. And then we sailed on to Iceland, on and this is all with 59 North on their 65-foot far um, Falcon. And it was
Oh,
so
right,
funny because
right.
the passage from Greenland to Iceland, the first 3 days we were like it had been blowing over 30 for several days, so the seas that come with that short
Yeah.
period and big and mean, and we were beating into it for probably 3 days, and I think almost everyone on that was I think it was like there were eight, nine, I think there were 10 of us on board, and like six people were like bunk ridden, super duper sick.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
I wasn't at all. And then not that I'm immune from seasickness. I definitely get seasick in like certain sea states, but that boat was so big that it didn't feel like an ocean passage to me because I'm used to doing it on a 30-foot
Yeah.
boat. So it was like I was like editing video, and Andy Shell came out, and Andy was even sick. And he was like, "Well, you look like you're fine." And I was like, "This like the motion just doesn't even feel real to me because it's like such a big boat."
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's because Mighty Sparrow's 32 feet, and
Hmm.
you get. I don't want to say you get slapped around harder in the ocean with the smaller boat, but I don't know. I agree with you. There's definitely a difference because I've back in the early days when I was just like learning and doing yacht deliveries and such. There was one February where we sailed from Antigua over to Turkey, and the
Mm.
low pressure systems, up in the north in the wintertime were kicking out some swell, but we're on like a 98-foot sailboat, and so
Wow.
when we saw like 30 to 40-foot swell, and swells big and gentle and stuff, but the motion was
Hmm.
there. It just, when I think about what that felt like to what it feels like to be in a 15-foot sea in Mighty Sparrow, I'm like, oh geez, it's
Yeah.
more like a washing machine.
Yeah, but still, like a Westall 32 versus like a contemporary flat bottom boat, like a Westall 32 cuts
Oh,
through the
that,
seas. Like, same thing. Tritea's, full keel cutaway 4 foot. She takes the seas like butter. But, you get in
yeah.
these, like, I've delivered like, 42-foot DeFores in the Atlantic, and it was just like being inside a snare drum. It was so gnarly.
Yeah, just bashing, like, and the noises. Well, and it's interesting because I talked to a few people who do like Francesca Klepchik. She's going to do the Vendée Globe and all that, and she's done the ocean race. And one of the things that she was talking about was just the noise and the
Hmm.
motion of a boat that's doing 25 knots surfing through the sea. And the intensity factor that those racers have to deal with, and granted, they're only doing it for a short amount of time compared to like what you and I would have to do if we want to go around the world. We're out there for 9
Hmm.
months, they're out there for 2, maybe 3 months in these boats. And but the intensity and just the angry sounds, and like you're saying, like being in a snare drum, I don't know if I could handle that. Like, I like
It's like,
to go ahead.
yeah, it's just like, I mean, well, the racing sailors like that, they keep it on the brink of failure
Yeah.
at all
Right.
times. So they keep it at that point, just on the precipice of everything breaking. And, but that sort of like, not, I mean, the sound, the motion, the stress of wondering if your rig's going to come down because you might push it too far, like that fatigues you mentally so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And fatigue is like the easiest way for things to go south when you're at sea. So that's why, like, I run a very conservative sail plan. I'm not trying to get anywhere super fast. I'm just like, and that's what I tell everyone that's like getting into ocean sailing. I'm like, reef down. You're not in a hurry. Just like, like run a small sail plan at night so you don't get slammed by, because the squalls are always meaner at night. So it's just like, yeah,
Always. Well, and that's, yeah, it's one of those things where I always tell people too, like, hey, you're already doing what you want to be doing. You're out there on the ocean sailing. So what's the big hurry? And kick back and enjoy it. And yeah, I mean, when I'm powered up, there's sometimes when I'm powered up and I'm loving it, and Sparrow's loving it, and you can just feel the boat's in the rhythm and you're right in that perfect spot. But then there is a distinct difference when you're overpowered and you're just putting so much pressure on the rig that you just
mm-hmm,
know the Sparrow's not liking it anymore, and
mm-hmm,
now you're dancing with the devil. And when you are planning to be out there for weeks or even months at a time, it's all about conserving and being kind to the vessel, because it's already in a punishing environment and it's already doing this amazing thing, but it has limits. And as soon as, if you don't take care of that vessel, it can't take care of you.
100%. Yeah, and it's like, and that stuff adds up, right? So it's like,
Oh
and
yeah.
what happens if you have critical failure and you're like in the middle of the ocean? Then it's just
Well,
like
James,
you
funny you
gotta.
would say that, because that
But
was
yeah, but but like you were saying, like Tritea, I I love her when I'm on the wind, the boat's balanced, the seas are polite, and I'm doing like 5 to 6 knots is like a really happy zone. But then
yeah.
when she gets like over 7 to 7 knots or over 7 knots for more than half an hour, I'm just like, nah, time to
Yeah,
reef, because it's like
that's
I don't need the speed that much, because I, like you said, it's that moment where your vessel is just, she's just overpowered just enough, and all it takes is a little bit more to make it like even worse. So yeah, anytime she's over 7 knots for like, unless there's a current in the mix, but if she's like overpowered for more than 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I reef down and just like drop the speed.
yeah, yeah. And I've always found it's such an interesting emotional sort of roller coaster that I go on. As it starts to get a bit overpowered, all of a sudden there's kind of like a bit of worry, And then there's a bit of hesitation. Should I change it? Should I do this? And then there's this immediate like, yeah, let's do it. And you do something, and then you get back to the cockpit, and there's this flood of like relief because now the boat is back in the happy zone, and you're like,
Yep.
you know, you made the smart decision, and so you have this up and down, and then it's just like, we're there again.
It's also funny when you do that, you finally reef and you don't lose any speed. You're like, oh man, I should have done that a long time ago. Cause it's like, now the boat's happy. You're doing the same speed, but the boat's balanced. Nothing feels like stressful or scary. It's just like, in the groove.
And you're tracking now in a straight line, and you're not yawing all over the place and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I actually, with the help of the Gulf Stream, caveat there, I hit my 24-hour best of 224 miles on the last little sail from Florida up to North Carolina a couple months ago.
On a 32-foot boat. That is bonkers.
Well, we just had the perfect forecast, and you know the winds were juiced up enough so that I was just past a beam reach, and yeah, I hooked into the Gulf Stream. I rode it all the way up to Cape Fear, and it was cool. It felt really good just watching them tick off. But there were a few times during one of the nights that I hit a couple lulls. And again, the emotional roller coaster came. I'm like, no.
Like, oh man, there went my record.
Yeah, no getting out of this, no coming back.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Colin's day's runs on his Hawaii passage. Man, he was dialed in for that. Dude, I was watching his tracker and just like following so close. I was like, he is just crushing it. And he called me like a few days from Hawaii because he got hit by a squall that kind of spooked him. Yeah. And so like I talked him through, you know, I was like, you're fine. Just like run a smaller sail plan tonight if you're feeling nervous about it, you know, but he did remarkable runs for that size boat. Like really amazing.
And, you know, he's almost always got reefs in. It's like that boat has a way bigger sail plan than it actually needs. Because when we talked, I think he's almost down to like a third reef, a huge percentage of the time. And he's like, and we're still doing like 7.5 knots, no problem. It just cuts right through. And that boat's even tinier, isn't it? Like 28.
Oh yeah, 28 foot. Yeah. But so that was Carl Alberg's first design, was the Triton, and then he made the Alberg 30, which is my boat. And my boat was oversailed as well. So like these Alberg 30s are known to be really tender. So I dropped my aspect ratio 3 feet. Like I custom built my rig, so I dropped it by 3 feet. And at the time, so many people were like, oh, you're running that boat. You're going to kill the speed and blah, blah, blah. It's like the best thing I did because she likes 2 reefs in the main and 100% head sail. And she is like super happy. So I think that, I mean, they're not very beamy boats. So that's the sort of thing, right? Because it doesn't take much to bear the rails on this boat or on Colin's boat. And on Colin's boat, much lighter than mine, right? So, but he killed it. For it being his first solo ocean passage, like proper crossing, I was super stoked.
Yeah, he's a weapon, man. He and I just kind of met up because he just needed some information. He was trying to figure out how to gain some of that offshore experience without just having to basically go and just try and set sail to Hawaii before he was ready. He's really thoughtful as far as trying to think this process through and stuff. And we talked about some of the areas near Vancouver and all that he could train up. And then he just jets out and he ends up doing that trip down to San Francisco. And the video that he made on that one, I really, really enjoyed just because he got so into the mental aspects of what he was dealing with and how he was feeling. He was just so honest about everything. And then it was just great because that passage is not easy by any means. I mean, that coast.
Oh no, especially the first half. Yeah. Till you get to Cape Mendocino, everything above that is scary.
Yeah, I mean, and there's nowhere to run. You got those systems that are kind of sweeping down, and yeah, I mean, on the East Coast, in some little areas, I find it to be like that because also you get the Gulf Stream and everything. But I feel like you could duck in if you were doing any kind of coastal trip on the East Coast. But man, that all the way up there from Seattle down to San Francisco, man, that definitely looks fearsome. I mean, that's why they have all those nicknames, about how it's what is the nickname? What's the most common one for that area? Is it just
Well,
the
the
graveyard of the
Astoria one
ocean?
is the graveyard. Well, that's like the Columbia Bar is the graveyard of the Pacific.
Mm,
But
graveyard of
yeah,
the
you're
Pacific.
talking
That's
about
right.
from Seattle basically to LA. Well, I guess Seattle to Santa Barbara, there may be a dozen anchorages on the
Yeah,
whole coast.
it's
Like there
crazy.
is just nowhere to safely anchor on the West Coast until you get down. And even Santa Barbara down to San Diego, other than Channel Islands, there's nothing. There's just nowhere to anchor. So it's a very sort of like you got to commit.
Oh yeah, I mean, pretty much, all the way down to really like Cabo San Lucas, even the entire Baja Peninsula. There's like Ensenada, Baja Tortugas, and then Manor Cove, and then it's Cabo. So those are like your four
Yeah.
spots that you might be able to take shelter. But it's the fact that you got that lee shore that's just staring at you, where you're like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a scary thing. I mean, people a lot of times will be like, oh man, the ocean sailing that you do, you're so far out there. How do you? I'm like, psh, put me
Oh,
in the middle of that ocean, and I'm like, my safety net has arrived. I got nothing for 1,000 miles in any direction. I don't know. It's never overwhelmed me.
1000%.
Yeah.
Like I got stuck in Indonesia this last year because I didn't make it to Singapore in time before the monsoon switched
Right.
because I got held up. All kinds of stuff happened in Australia. I had to have the top end of the engine rebuilt, which held me up 6 weeks, and then I got stuck waiting for documents to be delivered in Thursday Island, which took 3 weeks. So I got pushed. I got to Java. I was cutting between this channel between the island of Java and the island of Madeira, and I saw 40 plus knots of wind in a channel where there was less than 10 feet
Yeah.
under my keel, and there was shoals on either side. 40 knots for 2 hours, an hour and a half to 2 hours. And it was like the rain was so dense, it was like driving in a snowstorm. So like I was even putting on my snorkel goggles, but you couldn't see past the bow because the rain was so dense. And you would just see like fishing boats just come out of the like a silhouette, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like,
Yeah.
and it's just like, and like I had, the engine in neutral. I had like just like only I think I dropped the main. I had a scrap ahead slot and I was still doing like 8 knots. I couldn't slow the boat down.
So
It was just
scary.
like
So
terror. And
scary.
again, in the middle of the sea, no problem.
No
Like
problem.
sailing from Fiji to New Zealand, just all those squalls like that, and systems that would last 24 hours like that. You just like shorten sail or you heave to and that's it. But
Yeah.
near shore where you're in 10 feet of water, I've never seen anything like that. And it was terrifying.
Oh my god, it's like my living nightmare of just
Dude, it was the
oh
worst. Yeah.
you can't escape it. But isn't that one of the neatest things about sailing, that you've put yourself into a place that you cannot run and hide. There are situations that will be thrown at you that the idea of like, you know what, I'm just going to go down below, I'm going to lock myself in there, and I'm going to hope it all turns out okay. That's just like not an option at all. You have to get
It
up
is.
there
Yeah.
and face everything that's coming at you and just do your best. And I mean, I don't know about you, but like when I get in any situations like that, and I don't think I've ever been in that situation, thank goodness. But when you do make it through, that
Mm-hmm.
is that's just like a feeling that I don't find anywhere else in the world, where you're just like, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I'm still alive. And it
Yeah.
gives me a whole different reference for everything. It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
For sure. And it's like, I mean, you're so spent at the end of it, but then it's also
Yeah.
like, I remember the first time I was in like 30 knots and then the seas, right? And it was like the first
Yeah.
time I was solo in 30 knots and I'm taking seas on the beam, the seas that come with that. And it was like, I was like laying here in my berth and I was like hearing sounds of the boat. And I was like, the boat going to break apart? Like, I didn't know, right? Because it was the
Yeah.
first time. So I was just like, is this even possible to withstand? You know what I mean? And
Right,
then
right.
sure enough, get through. Was it comfortable? Absolutely not. But the next time I was in like 30 knot squall, didn't even hear the sounds. It's
Yeah.
like you gain that experience, you gain that comfort. Okay, I survived that. And I know what I did to manage the last time. And then you want to try to keep yourself out of those situations, but we don't always have that possibility. But yeah, it is funny though how the sort of like level of fear and like anxiety changes as you get more experience.
Yeah, yeah, and you do. I mean, and that's one of the biggest things that I try and help people with, whether they're just emailing in or actually if I'm actually going out and spending time with them on their boats, is that you know, good or bad, every experience on the water is going to gain you a little bit of confidence. I mean, I suppose a
Yeah.
caveat could be for something that happens is so traumatic that you then got to work through that. But um, yeah, I mean, it's never gonna be just 100% all right, and everything's gonna be, Jim Dandy out there. But that's a good thing because when those squalls come in and when those malfunctions happen on the boat, you get that's an opportunity to test your skills, how you can brainstorm, how you can fix things. Because again, it's not like we can just pull over to a West Marine. We have to be able to
Yeah.
fix what we have with what we have.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean,
Yep.
that's what I was thinking when you had the rudder failure and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
then you're able to use the drogue to self steer. And I was thinking, as soon as that happened, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, what would I do if Mighty Sparrow's rudder like fell off, which I think is almost an impossibility because it's like a 9 foot long barn
Yeah.
door that I don't even
Mm-hmm.
weighs 500-600 pounds. Hopefully I should knock on some wood here.
Yeah.
But
I've
yeah.
thought a lot of things were impossible, but yeah.
Yeah, right. But I was just like, I'm thinking to myself, well, how in the heck would I do that? What would I do? And you have to peel through your like inventory of like, oh, I have that one, 6 foot section of galvanized pipe. I could probably
Mm-hmm.
utilize that and this and that. And I don't know. I think that's just one of those great aspects that sailing just can teach people is like, well, here's your stuff, and when this goes wrong, make it work, MacGyver this out, and let's see how you do it. Because it was so cool. I was really impressed with that drogue. That was very, very cool.
It's that whole situation. Like the funny thing was like, and for anyone that doesn't know the backstory, on my sail from Los Angeles to Hawaii, 14 days out, I had total steering failure. So I believe I clipped a submerged sea container, and it broke. My rudder is attached to the keel, so it's a big rudder to my full keel, and there are bronze rods that hold a sandwich construction of wood, and those bronze rods failed. So the tiller post is like this; it would move, and then this thing was just swinging merrily in the sea when it
Right.
failed, and it failed in my hand. So the boat, I think what it was doing is, I think
What?
the rods were bending like this, like how
Yeah.
metal does, right? I think
And
they
then it
had
just
been
let go.
fractured. Yeah, because I was like I was like, it won't get on course. I couldn't figure it out. It was just like couldn't stay on course. And then the tiller just goes silent over in my hand, and the boat comes hard up into the wind. And I was like, oh no. So, and I started hitting record that instant. So, um, at first I had hoped it was just the bolt on the tiller had sheared off, but I
Yeah.
was like, maybe it's just that. I was like, but I want to put my GoPro on the water to see what's happening. So I zip tied the GoPro to the sea hook. I dropped all sail and I put it in the water. And sure enough, I could see that the tiller post had separated from the rudder, and I was just like adrift. Um, and so that whole thing, I spent 2 days adrift. Like that day, I tried to dive on the rudder because I thought, oh, it'll be easy. I have very low freeboard, everything. I'll just get in, I'll wrap a line around through the whole cutout, and I'll run it up. And I thought I could make a line that goes like this, right? So I could steer from the cockpit
Mm-hmm.
in the sea. So even with all sail down, I was still sailing it over a knot. The boat was
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
sailing, so I was being pulled tight on my tether. I couldn't even touch the rudder. Like normally, I can hold the side of my boat and touch the rudder, but it was impossible to even get my hands on the rudder, let alone get a line lashed through and back up. It was just not. And the boat was rolling with such violence that I was worried about getting
Oh,
knocked
it's
out and drowning.
yeah.
So like I climbed back up, I put up the little sail, and it's funny that first night I put my drogue out to slow my speed so I wouldn't go, too far off.
Mm-hmm.
But I put a little bit of sail up, and just like it was rough because I'm just taking everything on the beam because the boat's just like. And now I
Oh.
had a vintage Sail-O-Mat auxiliary rudder wind vane, but that rudder was so small, it wasn't powerful enough. Like a hydro
Yeah.
vane, if I had had a hydro vane, it would have been a non-issue. But
Totally.
that wind vane, that old wind vane couldn't handle the pressure of the sails on its own. So that's why I couldn't just use that. I could have easily steered with that, like under motor power, right? If you just by hand, but it couldn't sail and handle the pressure of the sails. So second day, I put on scuba gear, tried to dive on it because I thought, well, if I could be underwater longer, maybe I can fight my way to it. That created more drag, and that's actually the only time I got really scared in that scenario. Was like my arms pinged, and
Yeah.
so there I had lost. I was like, am I going to have energy enough to get back on the boat? And that was the only moment of like kind of terror. I was like, I need to get back on the boat now. So I got out of my gear, got back on, pulled my gear up at the last of my energy. But I remember that first day after the first dive, I sat in the cockpit and I looked down in the cabin because like, okay, what are my options? The options are figure out how to steer the boat or call for rescue. And a cargo ship comes, I have to scuttle the boat. And I looked down and imagined the boat filling with water. Now, like
Yeah.
I don't own anything on the planet that isn't in this boat.
Right.
And I had spent 4 years refitting it. I was like, this boat is perfect other than this one issue. Like everything's perfect. So I was like, I'm going to figure this out. So luckily I had like 2 professional captains, sea captains on my shore team. So I was texting them via Iridium Go. I was like, and they were like, do you have a drogue on board? I was like, yes. And they're like, okay. And so Captain Noah Pepper had taught himself how to do it because he had done a double-handed transpac. So he explained it, and then Captain David Stovall was explaining other ways to set it up. So I just happened to have all the stuff on board to rig it up so that I could steer by drogue. And so the third day is when I got it, and within 3 hours I was on course. And I didn't even want to tell my team because I was like, well, maybe it's a fluke,
Yeah,
So
yeah, right.
and
Don't
sure
wanna
enough,
jinx it.
like they start texting me because they could see my tracker. I was pulled back on course. So,
Nice.
but again, like you said, I had everything on board because I had like, tried to over prepare, tried to think of like what I don't even know.
Yeah.
And luckily I had the stuff on board to make that happen. But yeah, it's like we're all on our own.
Yeah.
And it's funny, my older brother is like in the executive branch of the NSA, and he was in DC while that was happening. He had lunch with the Commodore of the Coast Guard, and he was telling the Commodore about this whole situation. And
wow.
and he was like, "Oh, my brother's out there alone." He's like, "Oh, he's a solo sailor." And my brother said, "Yeah." And he was like, "He'll be fine." He was like, "We hardly ever have to rescue solo sailors." He was like, "Most of the rescues are like multiple people on boats." He was like, "Solo sailors are very resourceful. He'll figure it out." And sure enough, figured it out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. I
So,
wonder. I think that I would think that little statistic probably comes from the fact that you've got so many different people on board that because if you've got crew that are like, we got to get off this boat. This
yep.
is not there. We're it's. I
Yep.
think Rutherford even had mentioned there was one point where he almost kind of had a mutiny when it was blowing like 90, and he was like, "Nah, we're fine. Don't worry about it." And there were crew
Yeah.
that were like really worried about it. And yeah, I would think solo sailor, we also get so in tune with the boat.
hmm
Yeah, that's interesting that he says
I
that.
think solo sailors are also probably just more cautious because there's no one to save us, right?
Good
So
point.
I
Yeah.
mean, definitely like I slow my speeds down to 50% of what I want to do. Like my reaction times, like if stuff gets silly, I step out in the cockpit and I count to 5 before I do anything, just to slow my and not have a reactionary. To be like,
Yeah.
okay, I want to be measured in what I'm doing and not because if you start getting crazy, that's when bad things can happen. So maybe it comes down to that too. Solo sailors are aware that we're the only ones out there.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
have to really sort of like watch out, and definitely with injury too. It's like a real concern.
We have to pay the price. And there's
Mm-hmm.
just nobody else that's going to lend a hand if the decision we make is the wrong one. Because
Yeah.
we're being a little cavalier. Yeah, there's no like, well, let me help you out there, Bob. It's like, no, it's just me.
Did you have any major failures on your circumnavigation?
On that one, not. I mean, having the desalinator pump explode on me was
Mm,
definitely because that going into it, I thought that was like a necessary piece of equipment. Turns out that
mm-hmm.
Mother Nature provided enough fresh water once I figured out better ways to catch it. But that was like a
Mm-hmm.
case of, a challenge, then creating this opportunity for innovation. And now, I mean, I still have one when I go out on the
Mm-hmm.
boat, but it's one of those things where I'm like, no, I don't need that. I know I'm going to be able to catch
Yeah.
rain. But no, just the standard stuff of, broken traveler cars. And I had my staysail stay, the eye bolt that pins it down to the deck, that let go down in the Southern
Mm.
Ocean one day.
Woof.
But yeah, the West Sail, as long as you're doing those daily, everyday checks and finding
Yep.
those little pins that are sliding out, or the rivet head on the deck sort of thing, and then you can start finding it all. She held up really, really well. God, I'm trying to think what other little things did go wrong. I mean, I before I forget though, to go back real quick to when I'm watching you in this video. First, you just go over to inspect that rudder, and
Mm-hmm.
you just got like the snorkel stuff on, and I'm already biting my nails because I hate getting in the
Mm-hmm.
water when I'm out on the ocean. Like, I'm thinking sharks, I'm thinking like the boat going away, all that sort of stuff. But then you pull out all that scuba gear, and I'm like, oh no, so much
Yeah.
heavy stuff, and the boat's like
Mm-hmm.
wobbling around. I was like, oh, this is where people get hurt and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about after 200 something days, and I went to go scrape the bottom of the hull before I got
Mm-hmm.
to like the doldrums, and I was down there. And one of the, I don't have a ladder or anything. I would just climb up the boomkin and the whisker stays, which normally it was totally fine. I could do that pretty easily. Now, I had not really exercised all that much for 6-7 months out at sea,
Yeah.
and when I went to
Mm-hmm.
climb back on, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know if I can do
Dude,
this.
it's so scary.
so, so scary. And I actually, I kind of chilled for a little bit, but it was me again, because the motion of the boat was, even in a very slight sea, Mighty Sparrow
Mm-hmm.
rolls, and you really, really get to know it when you're underneath that thing and you're looking at the keel swinging. And I got hit in the head, and there's little like
Yep.
plume of red blood in the water, and
Mm-hmm.
that actually gave me the adrenaline boost that I
I bet
needed to then climb right back up as fast as I could. Oh
that is
my
definitely a good
gosh.
motivator.
Well, and like, Knox Johnson used to swim along Sue Haley while it
Mm-hmm.
was sailing, no tether. Can you
Yep.
imagine that?
It's like, well, if you watch like Beyond the West Horizon with the Hiscocks, like Eric Hiscock's, like they're at sea. He's climbing up the Ratlins, standing on the spreader, casual. No, they have no protection. It's why it's so funny to me. So many people will be like, I can't believe you're not wearing a PFD and you're not tethered in while you're standing in the cockpit. I'm like, I also don't wear a motorcycle helmet and walk upstairs. Like everyone has their sort of like, what they know what they're comfortable with. So, but if you look like back, and again, like all my heroes were from like the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah.
There was none of that stuff happening. Some people would tie in, but for the most part, like you were saying, he would swim next to the boat. It's
Oh
just
my
like,
god. I couldn't even imagine doing that. And he'd be like, well, as I started to get tired and Sue Haley would start to outpace me, that's when I'd climb back aboard. And I'm just like, wow. Well, and it's funny you say that thing about like the PFD and everything. Anytime because I do a lot of speaking engagements and stuff, and anytime, because it always comes up, because all my video clips,
mm-hmm.
I've never clipped in, I don't have it, and I always recommend that stuff, but never have a life jacket on, because for a solo sailor, that only leads to one thing if you do fall overboard, and that's a
Yep.
much longer period of time before you go from alive to no longer alive. Well, so when I ask that question, it's like, why don't you wear a life jacket? I'm like, well, let me answer that with a question. Would you rather drown or get eaten by a shark? And then
Mm-hmm.
people are always like, oh, I'd rather drown. I'm like, well, let's go through the steps of what would happen if I end up in
Yeah.
the water and I can just float there. Because, dude, you will
But
eventually attract things, and they will start to
well,
pick
even
you
if you
apart.
even if you don't get eaten by a shark, like you're there, like I don't want to have to unclip and be like,
I don't
okay,
think you could.
like I don't want that relationship with my death. I want to be able to be like, okay, I'm getting tired. Okay, this is like, I'm out, you know?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you know, I tell people the same thing. It's like I clip in, and sometimes I'll throw on a PFD because it's easier, quicker to clip in with that to go forward with
Mm.
my tethers and stuff. But and so many people are like, well, if you get the personal thing, you know, it's going to alert people. I'm like, nah. you,
Oh, I
you
know the
are
personal
you're like
e-curves.
1,000 miles from any land. You are not getting rescued. It is not
Yeah.
happening. Like,
Well,
yeah.
and I think and that's usually the kind of end argument from my point of view when it comes to all that stuff is I'm like, if you even think for a second that the safety gear that you have allows you to be more cavalier or take more chances, well then it's no longer safety gear. It's actually that's like something that's an issue. The
Mm-hmm.
fear and the knowledge that if you make one false move and you end up in that water with that boat sailing, that's it, game over. I think
Yep.
that makes your focus and your decision making and all that so acute that it's probably the greatest safety feature of them all is that fear and that knowledge that, yeah, I mean, what you're doing is dangerous, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you can pay the ultimate price, so you better keep your head on a swivel and make good decisions. I mean, I will never forget seeing this clip, and this guy, he's standing up on the bow and he's got his tether, but he's up there
Mm-hmm.
dancing and he has a bucket on his head. And I'm just thinking to myself, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. You could so easily lose your balance and
Yep.
fall overboard, and now you're getting bashed against a hull and you're thinking like, oh, I'm tethered in. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Di
that's a
di
morbid subject for
di
6:35 in the
yeah, but
morning.
oh well, don't
But a
worry.
good
It's
one.
6:37 in Indonesia. So,
I know. It's
yeah,
so crazy.
it's for sure, and it's just like people putting themselves at risk for clicks, for views. You know, it's just
Yeah,
it
it's a
does my
little,
head in. It's
nah, for
maddening.
sure. Well, and I think you do a phenomenal job. Obviously, I don't. People are always like, "Oh, do you watch this person? You watch that person?" I am so busy, and then usually I'm trying to
Hmm.
get out on the ocean myself. I don't devour a lot of YouTube sailing channels, but whenever I get the chance to meet up with people, I always try and watch some of it, just get a little background and everything. Like Sam Holmes, and I've been fortunate enough that a lot of the YouTube community has been willing, just like you, to come on the show and have a chat. But like Holly Martin, it's just it's one of those things where I do these little dives into it, and you do a phenomenal job of filming what's going on out there and making it really. I mean, I felt like I was watching a documentary last night. It was great, really
Thank you.
talented.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Especially well, I call them like the passage films because I definitely approach
yeah,
those different than the weekly episodics. Like the weekly episodics are a true vlog. It's just like me showing things I'm seeing, anchorages and stuff. But the passage films, I treat them as a film. So it's like with the scores, the way I film it, like
mm-hmm.
everything. I use kind of quiet spaces and stuff. It gives you an hour to tell a story in a
Yeah.
much different way than you can in 20 minutes. So it's like, and those are like my passage films have the highest views of any of my videos on YouTube. So obviously they work
Oh,
as
they
a
resonate, dude.
filmmaking tool. So
Well,
yeah,
when that school of fish come in and then you crank that music, I was like,
yeah,
oh, this is great, dude.
yeah. It was crazy. That school of tuna was two different types of tuna. Stayed with me for 3 days, and the marlin stayed with me as well. And he would
Oh,
pick off
wow.
fish, and the school just got smaller and smaller over 3 days. But you would see his bioluminescence at night as he would come in and strike,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it
yeah.
was pretty phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, what a brutal existence life at sea. I've always felt like the most the toughest thing that any animal on this planet has to do is be a flying fish, because they are not only attacked in the water, but the
Hmm.
minute they leave the water to escape the fish that's chasing them, they've got birds eyeballing them left, right, and center. I mean, talk about an existence full of fear, like just constantly on the run.
Not to mention, like, think about they're such a remarkable creature that
Mm-hmm.
they're in a mid step of evolution right now, right? And it's actually put them at double risk. So it's like they've done the impossible, and they
Yeah.
fly so far. It is so, and I've never been able to really film that. As you know, it's impossible to film the elegance of a flying fish because they're so small. But you watch them soar for so
Yeah.
far. It's remarkable. But again,
They're
like you're
amazing.
saying, they're getting it from both sides.
Dude, and if that, that's why I think usually I'm 50-50 between when I hear one thump onto the deck at night, I'll either go up and save his life or
Mm-hmm.
I'm cooking and eating it. But, it's one of those where sometimes I'm like, I'm going to give this little guy a break. I feel
Yeah,
so
I always
bad
toss
for
them
him.
back over. Yeah, I'm like, nah, bro, I got you. Don't worry.
Well, for me, it just depends on how long I've been out there. The longer I'm out there,
Yeah,
the more I
that's
become
valid.
part of that food chain. And I'm like, oh, baby, I got a nice little
Mm-hmm.
flying fish stick. This is going to be
Mm-hmm.
delicious.
But what's
Uh,
interesting is like Slocum said, halfway through he stopped fishing because he realized like those are his companions.
yeah,
So like
yeah,
he
yeah.
actually stopped fishing. So he had sort of the opposite sort of like he had like a sort of like, you know, that was his companions.
Well, and honestly, on that note, it's kind of interesting because that's one thing I've never really ever liked doing, and I haven't put out a huge amount of like episodic sort of YouTube stuff, but I've never wanted to film like the whole catching of a fish and then,
Mm-hmm.
I may have way back in the day, but that's always kind of a sacred little thing that I'm kind of like, this is a life that I'm taking and then I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
devour this thing. And I don't know. I've always felt bad. There was a passage I was on where, we hooked a nice little mahi and the guy I was with was like, "Oh, get the camera, get the camera." I was like, "Well, let's not worry about the camera. Let's just get the fish in here and all this sort of stuff."
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think it's just my own little personal thing, but it is.
No,
It's not.
yeah,
Yeah.
it makes sense. And also, but and on the flip side of that, like respecting that and respecting that you're taking his life and acknowledging that, I think, there's a lot. I think that's a lot. That's more of a beautiful thing to be like acknowledge that this is taking place, and that you're going to be consuming this for sustenance versus like people that just, go to the store and buy food. So I'm like,
Right.
well, if you're
Right.
not willing to kill it, and be like part of that sort of like conversation, then yeah, I kind of feel like if everybody had to sort of do that, then it would sort of the scales would shift a little bit.
Well, we do. We live in such a very interesting time and place in the history of humankind where, yeah, we have all this food available, and it's kind of like I don't even know where this stuff comes from, but in the not too long past, yeah, every single meal you would have had, you would have taken time and been like, oh my gosh, we're so fortunate to have this. We are no
Mm-hmm.
longer going to be hungry for a little bit. And now, yeah, I mean, you can't, I still, it's always funny to me when I walk into a grocery store after a long, long passage. And it takes me a little bit because I'm looking around and there's just such a volume of
It's
food.
especially in like a Western country, it's totally bonkers. It's just like there doesn't need to be this many options. I don't need 85 choices of cereal. This is completely insane.
Well, and then you think about like the scale because my brain just starts running away with it, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm in this small town, and there's 5 grocery stores, and there's how
Mm-hmm.
many small towns and how many big towns, and this is just my country, and it's like, oh my good god, like there's, yeah, and then I try and just like throttle my head right back to like, okay, calm down. It's probably
Yeah,
a good thing that we have an abundance of food. Let's not freak out about it. But it's
there's
hard to
that.
do that switch back and forth from this simple, very, very calculated existence out on the ocean where you have to know exactly how much food you have and what your supplies are, and you have to pace it all out. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I screwed up royally on my trip provisioning it. I was not counting calories in all these things. And I was basically, there were, when I looked at it, after the fact, I had essentially allotted a lot of days where I might have like 1,500 calories or less of food. And I was calling that good. And
Mm-hmm.
I ran out. Like I was rationing for 3 months. I lost about
Wow.
45 pounds. But the
Wow.
interesting
That
part
is
of that,
crazy.
oh yeah, dude, all through the Pacific. Basically, I really started rationing underneath Australia and was not able to get a food drop brought out to me until the Falkland Islands. So
Wow.
the crazy part is that whole time I still had this pile of food, but it just
Hmm.
wasn't enough to go the distance. And I was trying to
Yep.
make it enough to make it all the way back, but you know, the fishing in the Southern Ocean is not it's not what it is like in the Atlantic or the Pacific. It's just there isn't much there, and at least on the surface. And you're staring at this food and you're just thinking to yourself, dude, if I'm so hungry all the time, and you'd like cheat and like grab one little handful of like dehydrated chili or something, and you have this
Hmm.
minute of just absolute pleasure followed by total guilt because you've just stolen from your future self. And it's this mind game that, again, I mean, not to say soul sailing is like this end all be all of this stuff, but there's just these aspects of it mentally that get thrown at you that I think are just so interesting. And even though they're like super big challenges, there's something about it that I'm drawn to. I'm drawn to getting stuck in these situations where I gotta make my way out or else that's it.
So, what do you think was your biggest takeaway? Like, what changed about you the most after that circumnavigation?
Oof, that's kind of a tough one because there's so much. I mean, you know, I didn't really go into it thinking that, oh, I'm gonna be like a famous person, or because I didn't even really tell people I was doing this. There was
Hmm.
like, besides friends and family and a small little Facebook account that my mom was updating. This was 2017. Don't even know if I had a YouTube channel at that point. But in any event, it was just one of those things where I wanted to go and do this for my own reasons, um, to mostly because I was curious and I wanted to see what it was going to be like to spend that much time at sea, and also, you get inspired by these old heroes like Bernard Moitessier and Knox
Hmm.
Johnson and all this sort of stuff. But when I did finally reach land, I guess one of the big things that I did realize is that I was never going to be the same person that I was before I left on that trip. And I didn't really think that that was going to be a feeling that I would feel like, okay, I had this new experience. Great. I'm still moving forward. I think all the experiences and that much time spent alone and going through all the good and the bad times out there,
Hmm.
like forever changed me. So I approach everything in life very differently. And I hate to say it, but I think the tough times and the suffering and everything that all the bad stuff that I had to go through changed me so much for the better once I finished that journey up. And that was something I definitely did not expect. I don't know if that answers the question. That's such a
It
tough
no, it
question.
does. It does absolutely. It does absolutely. Because like definitely the man that like stepped on off the dock to push to sea was not the man that returned. And
No.
it's like I'm. It's fascinating because I would imagine like you probably just thought it was going to be like a test of endurance, like because it's like people don't realize what like the mental aspect of solo sailing. And that's the thing that
Mm-hmm.
bums me out. There's so many people with Starlink now. They're robbing themselves of like that the majesty of
I got
disconnecting,
that in my notes. I almost
you
never
know?
make notes, but yeah, we got to
Yeah.
talk about that one
It's
for sure.
it's just like there's such an incredible experience of like and like you said, like there's amazing days, but the dark days, like the mentally dark days are very, very dark. It's like you can be like really mean to yourself at sea and like kind of go over everything that you ever have done wrong or other, it's like you can go down some really dark paths and then you have to pull yourself out, whether it's like distracting yourself with a book or whatever, or, just sitting out and looking at the ocean. But the mental aspect of being at sea for a long time alone, like I've spent nowhere near what you spent, but I've spent 100 nights at sea alone over the last
Mm.
4 years, and far more in port. Which it's like I always say, like I never get lonely at sea, but I get far more lonely
You lonely
cruising
in
by my
part, yeah.
solo in port. But
Makes
at
sense.
sea, it's such a beautiful thing, especially if you remove as many of the distractions as you can, and you just like all I do is I read, I write, and I'll edit video, and that's literally because like my filming, I may film less than 20 minutes in a 24-hour period, and some days at sea I don't have to film at all because I know how much I need to film, so I
Yeah.
only film what I need to make what I got to make at the end of the day because that's how I support myself. So, but if you can remove like the more distractions you can remove and the more you can move away from land life and the trappings of land life, the greater you're going to get and out of that experience.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and there's always been this this really enjoyable element, I think, of this communion that is an unsevered connection between you and the boat and Mother Nature. And as brutal as Mother Nature can sometimes become out there, that connection when it's unsevered, you sort of become, I don't know, I don't want to say you become one with it, but because you are not distracted like you're saying by these other things, by screens, any of that sort of stuff, you kind of become like this ultimate ocean creature, if you will, that's riding this boat that's floating, that's being propelled by this wind. And it takes me usually like 5-6 days before I really feel like my head is in the game and I'm in the zone. But I
Mm-hmm.
do know the couple of times that I used my sat phone to call people when I was on the big trip, that severed that connection instantly. And then
Mm-hmm.
also when I hung up that phone, my world came crashing in on me, and a depression, the likes of which I hadn't really felt before, came crashing in, because all of a sudden you
Mm.
go from like this idea of like, oh, I'm chatting with my friend, and this is great, and you kind of forget what's going on. That's the severing of it. And then all of a sudden when you hang up and you realize, oh, wait a minute, no, I'm not actually with that person. I'm out in the middle of this ocean by myself.
Yeah.
And it's just, I kind of was like, I'm not gonna use that phone. And I've never had Starlink on the boat, but
Mm-hmm.
I've been going back and forth because Oliver's going to be coming on tomorrow, and he and I have chatted a few times, and we were able to do like a 20-minute podcast while he was en route at about the halfway point. And obviously, like there's something to be said for being able to really bring an audience aboard. But I think to your point, it's a totally different trip if you're, I don't know, it's hard for me to even understand what it would be like to, or no, I shouldn't say that, because when I was on Rutherford's boat, now granted this was like a science expedition, we had full like 1 terabyte plan Starlink, and
Mm-hmm.
so everybody's phones, and I will say, and I've said it before, I've never felt, even though we were 400 miles offshore, I've never felt more disconnected from the ocean world around me than that trip. Um,
Yeah.
but it was more of a job. It wasn't like anything near like a solo ocean passage.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm
Well,
kind
yeah,
of all over the
especially
place.
crude, especially crude. Like I don't like when I've done crude ocean stuff, and that's one of the things like 59 North. They don't have Starlink on the other thing because they're sail training passages, and Andy's like, absolutely not. Like
Nice, nice.
this is ocean sailing,
You're not here to
And
be
so
thumbing through things. You're here to learn how
yeah,
to sail. Nice.
but and it's like, but again, when we're solo sailors and we go on crude, it's not the same at all. Like I far prefer solo ocean passages to like
Oh yeah.
doing it with crew. It's like it's such a different thing. But yeah, so the Oliver thing is so fascinating, especially if you look at the Oliver and Colin parallel thing that was happening. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. You
it's
know
like they
that
were
they
both doing go ahead.
sorry, they hung out the other day. They
Oh
bumped
no,
into
no,
each
huh?
other.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He
So
was
it's
uh
like, similar sized boats, both doing the same thing. Colin's doing it very quietly. and like, poor Oliver, like, jumped into the deep end, not even this. And again, he was pursuing his channel and everything. He was definitely, but then it went to the moon, right? So
Yeah.
I felt I'm still worried about him because, and I was aware that like the scale of it, he didn't understand the scale of it until he got to shore.
Yeah.
So, and it is intense. And, I know like when my Hawaii passage video went viral, it was insane. It got a million views on YouTube in like 2 months. And it's intense to get that sort of like, it just wouldn't stop. It was like 100,000 views in like 48 hours constantly, but also like the amount of evil I got, like the amount of hate that I got was unreal. It was just like I had to really quickly, and I had already been doing my YouTube channel for I don't even know how 7 years or something at that point. So I've had it, or maybe 5 years. I've had it 10 years now, but I'd already had a little bit of like you have trolls here and there, but when something goes viral, the amount of like evil that I experienced, I had to really get thick skin real quick. And like even still, I have a policy to where I never check YouTube anything after dinner because I don't want any of that stuff in my head before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
Because it is remarkable, like, and even it's like I've done it so long now, it is like water in a duck's back, and I'll share some of the funny comments and stuff on Instagram. But it's like I'm stoked for Oliver because now he can do the rest of his circumnavigation and not have to worry about financially. He doesn't even have to like worry about a YouTube following. He can just make content at whatever pace he wants to make content at. Yeah. But I do hope that Oliver does one of the next passages totally in the dark. I hope he like shuts the Starlink off and has that experience for himself to really see what it's like to get that sort of majesty. Mm-hmm. So especially now he's set, but it was like a wild thing. And I was kind of brought into it, not of my own accord, because I had like hundreds of people sending me his stuff, and I had like countless people adding me in his stuff. And and Oliver had written me last July and started asking me questions. So we had a correspondence for almost a year before this passage. So, and he had asked me a lot of stuff ahead of time and asked me about Hawaii and all this stuff. So seems like a super sweet dude. I can't even imagine like the level of that. I mean, like, and it's like, it's also funny too, because there's so many people getting in on the conversation that don't understand, because they're like, oh, he's the first person to ever sail. So then what happens is then people in the sailing community are going to be like, what the hell, So, and none of this is like Oliver's doing necessarily, it's not like he said he was the first person to do it, but you'll see people getting like bitter, or they don't understand why there's literally thousands of us doing this. And then one person is getting, Anderson Cooper is calling them, but I know. It's like, so it's, I worry about Oliver, but he seems like a sweet dude with a good head on his shoulders. And we texted the other day, or messaged the other day on Instagram about it. And, I just checked in to see how he was doing. And he was saying he had pretty severe imposter syndrome. And I experienced the same thing for like 2 years. I had imposter syndrome to where I was like, at some point, these people are going to realize that I'm not the person they think I am on YouTube.
Yeah,
but,
right.
And then at some point, you just reach a point to where you're just like, oh, well, I'm just who I am. And that's just I'll just move through life in this way. But it is strange to be like recognized kind of all over the world, everywhere. If I'm like, people are like, are you famous? I'm like, adjacent to boats sometimes, but it's like
in this small circle.
Even last night, like a couple walked up to me in Gili Gede in remote Indonesia, another cruising couple. They're like, oh, we love your channel and stuff. So in every port I've been to, I've had, people like talk to me about the channel and stuff. So it is interesting that we can expand the community in that way. But I really hope that Oliver does one of his next passages totally like internet free and just kind of gets tuned in and checks out.
I mean, dude, you are one of the big inspirations for him, because it was kind of interesting. I reached out to him before he left. I think he still had 40 days before departure, and we're having this chat, and I was really trying not to. When I heard about how little experience he had. I really had to make sure I didn't turn into like the old sailor who's going to tell this kid how he needs to do all this. I think I gave him one piece of advice, which was to do a daily check of all the pins and everything, and that, you know, he found that cotter pin missing off of his
Yep. Mm-hmm.
stay and stuff. So I was glad I told him that. But I was asking him about who his inspirations were, and I don't know. I mean, I'm at an age, and I guess it really does show that, yeah, my inspirations are Morticia and Knox Johnson and all these sailors, the first people attempting to go around the world, and Slocum and all that. And I'm so used to like-minded solo sailors that have all read those books. And I asked him, and the first name he shouts out, he's like, "Oh, dude, Sailor James." And I was like, "Oh, holy cow!" So that, I think that's a plot that the future generations, you've done such a good job of, I think, documenting and getting the solo sailing experience out there, that, you know, this next generation of solo sailors are looking to people like you to guide the way and give them inspiration. I mean, hats off to you. You've done an
Yeah,
amazing job at that.
I mean, it's really just like, and it's funny because I try to feature the books that I read because, you know, all like, again, like you, all of my heroes were from like another time, and I read about them. I read everything I could about every experience they
Yeah,
had. And
totally.
so, and then now there's a new generation that are getting turned on to sailing through YouTube. And so it is different. Same thing, that guy sailing Songbird, same thing. That kid wrote me a ton before he did his crossing, and he was like, you know, he had watched all my stuff and like that. And
Mm-hmm.
then he has like I think he has 1 million followers on TikTok and like almost 1 million on Instagram. Same sort of thing, right? So there's like a number of these you know, younger generation coming into it that are getting turned on through YouTube, you know. And that's like, with my channel, I don't only just do vlogs, I try to do as much informative stuff as well to
Yeah.
really, like, I'm a firm believer in good seamanship. So it's like, and there's like, I feel like a lot of the sort of party channels don't ever touch on that, and they never like really stress the importance of seamanship. But I always stress that people should like get experience, like this genre of being like, I'm gonna fake it till I make it. I have no patience for it because there's just no excuse for it. In this day and age, you can find your way onto boats, you can read books, you can get real world experience, go out with captains, volunteer on deliveries. There's a billion ways to get onto boats and ask a million questions. And like that, the stuff I've learned on yacht deliveries from other captains has helped me time and time again. So I always try to really encourage people to like get the experience ahead of time, because so that they don't like, so they can't actually continue with the dream, right? It's like, but it is interesting to like have like a young sort of like generation like that, because like I think like, well, the few living, my really like living top heroes is like Lynn Pardee and John Kretschmer, and I'm friends with both of them. So
Oh, good old
it's
Cratch,
it's
dude.
sort of like that sort of thing, right? So it's just like those are the people I looked up to, and I get to write them and ask them for advice. And then I have the same thing happening with this younger generation of sailors that are going out. So it's pretty fascinating, but it feels good to try to give back to the community and try to help people chase this incredible life that we have,
Yeah.
while also being able to do it long term instead of just like, you know, because the sea is the, you know, find out zone.
Oh yeah.
Neptune has no sense of humor whatsoever, and he will definitely smash you if you want to get cocky and like not, you know, try to cut the line. So,
Oh,
but yeah,
100%. Well, I mean, anytime like I was in these places, like going around Cape Horn and stuff, like I didn't even want to talk. I was just like, I want to quietly get around this and get back
you
up
know,
north.
sneak around the horn.
Oh, dude, totally. Like I've never felt more vulnerable than south of all those five capes, because
Dude,
that was the one time where you couldn't just jet north because there's a stupid piece of land right there. And I definitely have, I know the ocean doesn't even know I exist, but like I definitely have kind of a superstitious feel out there, and I really don't want to ever tick off Neptune and get him pissed, because I mean, and I've
yeah,
only ever seen I've seen the ocean in a lot of moods for sure, but I've never seen anything like Kretschmer's seen. I mean, geez,
Yeah.
he's blundered
Yeah,
and
but he he
he
does
says
that
it
to himself
himself.
though.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna
he does
say
it. Yeah, Kretschmer does that to himself. Yeah, you can't feel bad for him.
no,
But
no.
and like, but on the Kretschmer subject, like how interesting that he was doing. Like he was in like 10 knots of wind when he got dismasted.
Yeah,
You
I
know what I
know.
mean? It's
I
like
know, right?
it's. I mean, I guess that's good, right? But yeah. So.
It is. It's an interesting thing how sometimes you would think that the situation that's going to do the most damage doesn't do anything, and then yeah, one day you're just plodding along on a Zephyr, and then all hell breaks loose. And I think that the lesson there is, when you're out there, you never want to get just too comfortable. You don't want to get too
Mm-hmm.
cavalier just because conditions are great, because that boat is constantly depending on you to keep your eye on every last little thing, and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
keeps you going, and you're good. But to go back to your point about like gaining experience and stuff, yeah, I mean, I learned how to sail when I was like 18, so I kind of had a late start compared to a lot of people. But I had done like 3 ocean crossings under some really great captains. Constantly, I was just like a sponge. I wanted to learn as much about it as possible, devouring all these books. And there was a huge amount of experience gained before I ever was like, okay, I think we're ready to try the solo nonstop. And the only gamble, I guess, on my part was that I had never solo sailed before. But I did
Mm-hmm.
know, I was like, there's something so appealing about that. And the more I read, the more I gravitated towards the solo sailing stuff. And more specifically, the old time 1960s, 1970s guys that were doing it, because
Mm-hmm.
that just I wanted to emulate Knox Johnson's trip as best as possible, because that was the one that I was most curious about. And man, it just I definitely got my experience tenfold.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
It's so many people have asked me. They're like, "Oh, are you going to do like the OGGR or any of these around the world races?" And like for me, I don't know. I wouldn't want to sail past all the magic. Like I'm trying to see like the
Ooh,
whole world, you know?
yeah,
So I think when I finish the circumnavigation, then I could be like, oh yeah, I'll do a solo nonstop just to like do it, you know?
yeah, yeah,
Then I could see doing that. But first time around I'd be like, oh man, I want to see what's right there. I want to see what's right there. Like so,
yeah.
and like I'm almost 4 years into my circumnavigation now, and I have at least another 3 left, maybe longer. But like I got to New Zealand, I thought I was going to be there 3 months, 4 months. It was incredible, and I was like, okay, what, but the window to leave was coming up, so I was like, I got to make a decision. So I was like, why don't I stay here a year? What do I have to do to stay here a year? I was like, okay, I got to be able to make content to make money
Mm-hmm.
on YouTube, so I can easily make content in New Zealand because there's endless amounts of like it's a
Yeah,
massive cruising ground.
gorgeous.
So I
Right.
spent a year when I thought it was going to be 4 months, right? So and then here I got stuck in Indonesia 5 months longer than I expected. So like, you know, sometimes you just got to kind of roll with the punches, but definitely like for me, I want to see like every bit of magic that I possibly can.
Yeah,
And like let's just take a second and talk about like the magic that is us being you were pushed around the entire world
yeah.
by a breath of wind in some fabric,
It's crazy. It's crazy.
you know? And like
Yeah.
I'm in Indonesia, like a leaf on a pond from fabric, and we adjusted it and we have this like hollow vessel that holds
Yeah.
air. That's possible. Like I
And
think it's easy to not realize like I'll be like, this is insane. Like
well, and
that
just
this is
harnessing,
possible, you know.
and we're harnessing an invisible force. You can't see it. You can only feel it.
It's madness.
Yeah.
So cool.
It's
Yeah.
such a neat, like I always describe it as like when you're sailing, you're dancing with Mother Nature. It's the most communal sort of activity because I don't know. I've done a lot of long distance hiking, and I love getting up in the mountains. And there's all aspects of Mother Nature. I mean, heck, I live in a tent out here in northern Michigan when I'm up here in the summer. Like I just have to be like in tune with it. But on the ocean, the fact that you're being propelled by the wind that's blowing, and then you're in the sea and you're constantly getting physically pushed around. I mean, even in a big thunderstorm, if you're camping in the woods, you're typically not getting, the ground isn't moving underneath you.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just, it's in its rawest, most just natural element. It's just, when you're out there, God, you are one with planet Earth. It's just, I don't know. It's almost impossible to really describe. It's just one of those things where you got to be like, come with me. Let me show you what this is all about. Unfortunately, if I do that, usually within a couple hours, a person's so seasick, they're just like, dude, what are they? Well, why would you ever do this?
Yeah, I know. Well, it's like, and I always say too, like, well, Andy Schell says sailing is travel at a human pace, which I love that quote. It's just a fantastic quote. And it's like, I always say, I've traveled halfway around the world about the speed of mall walkers. Cause it's like, it's like the pace is so, or I try to describe to my landlubber friends back home. I'm like, well, imagine if I called you up and I was like, hey, do you want to drive from like LA to Pennsylvania at like 4 miles an hour? They'd be like, no. Never.
What?
Absolutely. That sounds terrible. So,
well, and that was a big theme though on when I did the Appalachian Trail back. It was like 5 years before I did the trip around the world, and that one taught me and gave me a lot of the confidence to actually go after it because you do a lot of lonely nights on mountaintops. You definitely deal with a lot of discomfort and sort of suffering on the trail, but shoot. Oh, I lost my train of thought there. Dang it. What were we talking about right before?
We're just talking about, sailing and the misery. What were we talking about? I was talking about slow paced travel.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, because every once in a while you'd have these hikers that they're blasting up that trail and they're trying to do it in like 80 days or something, 90 days. And you do not see anything. You think like the difference between doing 2.5 miles an hour on foot and doing like 4.5 miles an hour is astronomical as far as what input is coming in. You could blow right past somebody having a heart attack on the side of the trail if you're doing 4.5. And you just like, boom, you're gone and you never see anything. And there was always that big debate of like, are you getting the experience out of this if you're gunning for it and you're just trying to do this thing as fast as humanly possible? And for the most part, most of the people that we hung out with and really were like-minded, we're all kind of like, they're like, dude, I'm trying to slow down more so that I don't miss anything. I'm really enjoying this. And the people that were just absolutely gung-ho trying to get there as fast, and sometimes people just only had a certain amount of time, but the focus seemed to be kind of the misery of how hard it was to do it that fast. And you'd say, well, did you get to stop and see this and that? And they're like, no, I didn't I blew right past that. And it's kind of like, oh, geez. And I know everybody's got their own reasons for doing these sort of things and having these experiences. But yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said about taking that nice slow pace, taking it in. What does Ferris Bueller says, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and take a look every once in a while, it might just pass you by. I just murdered that quote, by the way. Terrible.
Yeah. We'll roll with it. Well, it's also interesting because like some people can only take 2 years of their life to do a circumnavigation. That's a pretty fast cruising circumnavigation. So they'll do it in 2 years. So like their experience is wildly different than mine, and mine is wildly different than someone that does a 15-year circumnavigation because they're going to see way more than I've seen, right? And I've had so many people like, oh, you sailed past there? Oh, you missed that? Oh, that was the best thing, And I'm like, well, you can't see it all. So you just see what you can see, So, but it is interesting that, when it comes to circumnavigations, there's it's all allotted in a different way. And some people want to move at a fast pace, and that's what they're comfortable with, and that's what brings them joy. And then others of us want to move at a different pace. So
Yeah,
yeah,
there's no
and like you
definitely
said,
no
everyone has
right
their own
answer.
reason for. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and that'd be the thing when the debate would get heated around the campfire or something like that. It always went back to this one saying of hike your own hike. Everybody's doing their own thing. It's whatever makes you comfortable. But I think there's something to be said about, listening to other people's experiences, because
Yep.
I never would have gone and done the things that I've done had I not read books about the AT, books about sailing around the world, because frankly, I didn't even know those things existed. And that's again me kind of trying to tip the hat towards guys like you that are out there sharing the experience, because you never know, there could be like just one kid who's just like, man, I totally lost in this big bad world of ours, stumbles across your trip to Hawaii and is like, oh my gosh, like this is a thing. And then boom, the trajectory of that life has totally changed for the better, and or for the
And
worse. I'm just kidding.
but it seems like, yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I've had so many people reach out to me
Yeah.
and tell me, like, they're like, I didn't know it was possible to do it on a budget because I'm doing it on a 30-foot boat. I have very limited funds. I look like a dirtbag. So it's like, they're like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, there's a different way to do this where it doesn't have to be a big flash catamaran.
Yeah.
Oh, you can do it on like an old small boat. Like, I could get the money for an old small boat. They're like, that's possible. So that's like a pretty beautiful thing that I've gotten to experience, is have so many people reach out to me and be like, I quit my job. I like bought a boat. I cruised down to Mexico. I loved it. So I went further and I went further. And they're like, I had no idea until I saw your YouTube videos that this was even possible. I mean, I've had thousands of people write me similar stories, and it's
Yeah.
pretty remarkable to get to, like, you know, share my mistakes, share my successes, share when I mess up, you know, the things I learned, the joy I felt, to try to, I just give it to everyone. That's the most beautiful thing about my job, is I get to give everything away for free. Like, everything I make is free. Anyone can watch it. So it's like, what other job out there where you get to give everything away for free? So even someone that is super broke can still watch every video I've ever put out,
Yeah.
but I can still manage to make a living at it and change people's lives. It's pretty special.
Dude, it truly is, man. And I know we're just about the same age, and I, after my 2022 trip, it took me 2 years before I put that boat back in the water. There was a lot of PTSD and everything dealing with
I
that,
bet.
and it was one of those things where um, when I when I was in that off period where I wasn't doing my own trips, that was when I started opening myself up to doing like coaching and consulting, where, first it was just like on the phone. People would call and we would talk and talk through whether it's just passage making, but a lot of times it came down to like anxiety and dealing with, having the confidence to go on their first passage. Then it developed into this like, oh, I'm going to fly to this place and we're going to hop on this boat. And we're going to spend 3 days and we're going to work out these nervous feelings and this lack of confidence so that you can then go after that passage you want to go. And besides it obviously being kind of like a job, it all of a sudden made me aware, like, oh, just because one day I'm going to have to hang up my adventurer hat, because eventually it's going to happen to all of us. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that transition means adventure is done. It means it's my turn to start passing on all these experiences, like you said, the screw ups as well as, the triumphs, and offer that out to the world to be able to then go on their adventures. And it kind of, it filled me with kind of this joy, because I was like, oh my gosh, the adventure life isn't really over. It's just going to be transitioning. And, now I've put the boat back in. I've done my own solo sailing since and all that sort of stuff. But it's like, okay, I know what's waiting for me. And I love the
Hmm.
fact that we can share our experiences and get them out there. And yeah, it's an amazing feeling. It really is, dude.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. So I know we're well past we're like an hour and a half. I just had a couple quick ones. I think we covered pretty much the notes that I said. Getting back up board, that was still so crazy.
Hmm.
We talked about Starlink, drogue sailing, YouTube. Oh, you know what was really cool? I think this is a good one to end on, really. In that presentation, obviously people always also ask me about pirates, and I'm like, dude, pirates don't
Hmm.
sail where I sail, man. They're not that far
Yeah.
offshore, and they're sure as heck not down in the Southern Ocean. But one of the interesting questions I saw or heard on that is they asked you about if you ever feel nervous or have any fears flying the American flag when you're abroad in
Mm.
all these countries. And your answer is like absolutely freaking not. And
Yeah,
I
nah. Yeah. Yeah, I
I
mean, I'll
love that.
always like, yeah, I mean, I'll always fly the American flag, and it's just like, I mean, is America perfect? Absolutely not,
No.
but, it's like, I couldn't be, I would be terrible at politics. So, it's like, and it is funny though. It's like, I don't allow any conversations about politics or religion or anything like that to take place on my channel
Yeah.
or even in my comments and stuff. Like, there's nothing I dislike more than someone preaching at me or giving me unsolicited advice. Like, not a fan of it. So I don't do that as well. But when it comes down to like flying the American flag, like absolutely, that's where I'm from. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And the pirate thing, it's like I got the questions. I got so frustrated with it because the funny thing is it's almost always Americans because Americans seem to be
Yeah.
terrified of everything. They're scared of everything, and I'm like, get out and see the world.
Well,
It's not nearly as dangerous as you think.
yeah, yeah.
But I made a whole video addressing pirates versus bandits, like imaginary security, imaginary risks versus real security concerns. So because there is this sort of like there are very specific places in the world where there is piracy, but there's also bandits, and you really need to differentiate the two. And like the Philippines right now is a red zone, so it's like there's a lot of cruisers have been boarded at gunpoint, a lot of scary stuff. Papua New Guinea, the mainland of Papua New Guinea, I was like 500 miles from like a solo sailor whose throat was slit when he was in an anchorage trying to ride out weather. But everyone knows you don't go anywhere near the mainland of Papua New Guinea. So on Noon site, they list all the security concerns for every country in the world. So, and these are all coming from cruisers who have been there, from the local law enforcement. So there's the known spots, but it seems like, you know, especially Americans are just scared of their own shadow. And if they got out in the world, they would realize, and again, if I left my iPad on my deck overnight, yeah, it would probably not be there in the morning. But
Right,
if you
right.
don't, my mom always said, like, don't give someone the opportunity to make the wrong decision. So it's like, and these are a lot of, I'm in Indonesia. There's like great deal of poverty here. So, which my boat's a lot smaller. I'm not on some big flash fancy yacht. So I don't look quite as like rich as like some of the other boats around me. But to them, we're millionaires in this piggy bank, right? So, and if they're like barely catching food for their family, then, that's the sort of thing you got to realize. We're living like the travel life, right? This like luxury travel life in their mind. So
Yeah.
you definitely have to like keep your head around like what you're doing in contrast to where you are, especially when you get into places like where I'm in right now. But again, like I think the only place I've had really concerned about getting anything stolen was Hawaii. Like I couldn't leave my
Yeah, you'd
dinghy on
said
any
that.
beach in Hawaii. Like
Right, right.
I would swim ashore with a dry bag because it was like everyone was like, your dinghy will not be there when you come back. So, but
Yeah.
every other country, I've never had any theft whatsoever. I've never had any sketchy situations. It's just, people around the world primarily are pretty lovely.
Are awesome. Yeah, I mean, I obviously I haven't stopped in anywhere near as many countries as you have, but the cruising that I've done, like in the Caribbean and the actual backpacking I did when I was younger in like New Zealand and the Med, all that sort of stuff, people are absolutely amazing. The vast
Mm-hmm.
majority of this world is a very welcoming and safe place. But it's great to hear that from you going through all these, because I mean, truth be told, you're living my dream. Like, I hope to one day be able to buy a boat on the West Coast and bring it back to the East Coast via the world, and take a number of years to do it. Um, and yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think we all get fed kind of this false idea of like scary stuff because, if it bleeds, it leads. So we're constantly being
Yeah.
told like danger, danger, danger. And in reality, which is what you're telling me, is like, hey, it's actually pretty darn safe out here. And it's easy to avoid the hot spots. And
Yep.
yeah, that's very cool. I'm
I mean,
glad it's
easily,
that way.
yeah, easily the most dangerous country I've ever been to is America. So, but
Yeah,
but
well,
and then on a side note, it's not. You need to rephrase what you were saying. It's you don't hope that you're going to do that. That's just what your next adventure is going to be.
yeah, well, eventually. The problem is, dude, I don't, the idea of letting go of Mighty Sparrow, and I know it's going to happen eventually, but I don't even want to think about it at this point. Like,
I mean,
that's my
can't cost that
home.
much to put her in a boatyard.
Oh, yeah. Well, she's in Cape Fear. You're going to go up, do some speaking stuff in Cape Cod this summer, and then I'm going to haul it out up in Maine. I don't know. I too have to, like you're saying, you have to sail with the seasons and on these time frames. It's
Mm-hmm.
the same on the East Coast with the hurricane season, down south during the winter, and then get it up north. And, that's definitely presented some issues. For a number of years. I was always leaving Maine at the end of October, beginning of November. And I would go directly offshore. And so I knew I was going to get beat up for a little while until I
Mm-hmm.
reached, far enough south. But all that came to an abrupt halt in 2022. So now I'm a little more, well, I don't even, well, that's a conversation for another time, that whole debacle and why that happened. But even the most seasoned sailors can make some very, very stupid mistakes when it comes to the
Yep.
ocean. So we're always
Yep.
learning, right?
Sometimes we get too comfortable too, and it's just like, and that's when
Yeah.
Neptune's like,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and I guess to the point real quick about like the idea of like Starlink and all the benefits for sure that come from,
mm-hmm.
being able to get information specifically on weather. Um, One of the problems with that trip and why I found myself in the situation I did was that I was putting all of my faith in the forecast and the what this little device was telling me was going to be all around me, both with the wind and what the currents were doing. And before I had that, because that was the first trip I had in Iridium Go, I never would have been able to see what the currents are doing. And I never would have wandered anywhere near the Gulf Stream had I not had that device. And, long story short, trust seamanship way
Yep.
before trusting some little screen that's telling you, hey man, this you be all worm your way. There's a clip where I'm like, I know I'm gonna be threading the needle a little bit,
Yep.
and then like,
That's when you
12 hours.
take it to the edge, and sometimes you find the edge.
Oh, I definitely found the edge. Well, James, I can't thank you enough again. Is there any, because you're doing like guidebooks and you've got the YouTube
Yeah.
channel. What else are you doing as far as like putting stuff out there?
I just published a cruising guide for the Channel Islands of California, which was like a 4 year long project that I hope to never do again. But and then I have like Hawaiian Adventures. It's like kind of my first sailing novel. I've put out couple of different editions of my logs in the past as self-published books, and that but yeah, at the end of this year there's like the Hawaiian Adventures. It's written more like a novel. It's every experience I had, all the cruising I did in Hawaii over 8 months. So that's coming out. I write for all the major magazines. I have an article out right now in latitudes and attitudes. I have an article out in Sail magazine about when my tiller broke in 45 knots in Cook Strait in New Zealand. And then I just finished a new article for Yachting World that's coming out in an upcoming issue about circumnavigating. Um,
Wow.
so
And
yeah, I do
are all
a lot of writing.
the guidebooks and everything, is that all on, did you publish those on Amazon?
No, I go through Paradise K.
Okay.
So it's like, yeah, it's like one of the biggest nautical book distributors for America. That's who Lynn Pardee has all her books distributed through. So
Oh,
they
okay.
do print on demand for my cruising guide,
Hmm.
and they distribute it as well. But you can, svtritea.com has links to all that stuff.
Okay.
But then
And
the
I'll
Hawaiian
put
Adventures
a,
book, I think, yeah, so the next one, I think I'm actually going to have it printed in mass because I was selling out the cruising guide. Because I did a speaking tour in California where I did like four, yeah, four different talks up the California coast in March.
mhm.
And I couldn't keep the books in print. They were selling out so quick. So the next one I think
Nice.
I'll print. I still now, my dear friend Sarah, who's like on my shore team that lives in Los Angeles, she's taken over handling all that since there's no way for me to ship books and stuff. So
Yeah.
we get orders every day. It's the first cruising guide for those islands that's come out. I think Brian Fagan's book originally came out like 42 years ago or something like that. So, and Brian Fagan, who he wrote sort of the Bible for that area, he did the intro for my book. And he's stoked on it, and he was glad somebody took the torch and kind of issued like a new book on those islands. So, but
Nice.
it's where I say in the beginning of the book, it's where I made all my best mistakes. It's where I learned how to solo cruise. I learned how to anchor solo.
Yeah.
And then the last like 30 pages of that book has an anchoring guidelines. So it tells you exactly what you need to know for anchoring, proper ground tackle setup for your boat, and really explains kind of everything you need to know. I think anchoring is the most important thing you can know as a sailor because it can be life or death either for you or your boat. So I believe good anchoring etiquette is something that everyone should practice. So yeah, so that's what all's in that book. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to pick that one up because I've always, I obviously most of my sailing is way offshore, but I've spent one or two seasons down in the Caribbean, and you're 100% right. I mean, if you're gonna be on the hook, I know there's times where, middle of the night, big old squall, and you anchored and
Mm-hmm.
it was blowing 5 knots, and now it's blowing 40. And what's happening to
Mm-hmm.
you and all the other boats around you? I know it's definitely a subject that comes up a lot in like the coaching and stuff. It'd be interesting to get your take on a lot of that because you have done so much of it. Well, I'm
A
gonna have
lot
to
in a
pick that
lot
up.
of environments, like a lot of environments, and like I've ridden out 4 tropical storms under anchor and 1 cyclone.
Oh wow.
Um, I've anchored in coral. I've anchored here in Indonesia. A lot of the anchorages are like 70 feet deep, and I don't have an electric windlass. I hand haul up,
Yeah, me
so it's
too.
like I have like a
Crank,
great
crank,
deal of it.
crank.
Yeah, yeah. So
Oh, very cool. Well, I'll put links in the description for all that. James, absolutely a pleasure to sit down and talk with you. Oh, one last question. That epic tall ship that's on your back, is that a
mhm.
specific boat?
It's a Spanish galleon.
It's a
So
Spanish
yeah,
galleon. How long
yeah.
did that take, dude?
I think it took us 6 months. Yeah, once a month for 6 months. And it was like some of the needles he was using were 25 mag, so it was 25 needles stacked together. And
Wow.
we'd sit for 4 to 5 hours with him. I have a really amazing photo of me reading a John Kretschmer book like this while he's like working on the back. It's pretty great.
Oh my
But
gosh. Amazing,
yeah,
dude.
it was
Looks great.
pretty gnarly. Yeah, I have a high pain tolerance at this point.
Yeah, well, and it seems like maybe just a little bit of an addiction to tattoos, but I think they look
Well,
great, man.
10% more and I'm done. I don't have to ever
I
get
know.
tattooed again. I'm almost done with my suit. So
All right. Well, thank you very much, James, for coming on, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again. And I wish you
th- th- thanks
safe
for having
winds
me.
and following seas, man.
And thanks for getting everybody's stories out there. I really appreciate what you're doing for the community, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. Try my best.